Good afternoon, everybody. This is Sister Ruth, and it's just before 4 p.m. here in the UK. It is Monday, September 11th, 2017, and today we are going to be talking about the aftermath of Irma and issues surrounding Irma. What exactly was it? Obviously we know it was a storm, but was it manipulated? Was it a cover story for something else, or what exactly was the plan with this thing? Was it a learning exercise for these AI D-wave systems that now control a large amount of data and need to be fed constant data to help them learn what people are going to do in response to particular stimuli? Was this just a learning exercise for these AI systems? Was there a larger goal in mind, or did things not quite go according to the plans of the powers that shouldn't be? So we're going to be talking about all these issues. Obviously, weather warfare has been on everybody's mind since Harvey. I do believe that this storm was manipulated. Maybe it didn't quite go as they planned. Or was there some other reason why they wanted to get people out of the Florida area? Did they know that this storm wasn't going to be as bad as they were saying, but they wanted an excuse to evacuate people further north up into Georgia and even further up? We're going to be talking about some of those kind of issues today. And I'm also going to bring forward to your attention a couple of stories that they let slip out while everybody's attention was on Irma. So the good news from Irma is that it has now dissipated. It is now just a tropical storm. It is no longer has hurricane status. That said, there are some significant winds still. You can see here, this is up near Jacksonville, currently having winds of around 60 miles an hour. So that's going to be getting pretty hard to walk about in. It's not something you really want to be out in. And I believe they are expecting a storm surge there, as you can see those winds driving into the northeast Florida coast. The good news was that Miami seemed to get off a lot lighter than they were expecting. The storm actually made landfall down here, the bottom southeast edge of Florida, just somewhere around about Naples, and then it kind of kinked inland a little bit, which took it over the Everglades, which is one of the least populated areas that it could have gone to after Naples, and that meant that it dissipated some of its energy by the time it got further up to the likes of Tampa Bay, and so on up this western coast of Florida. So that was really good news for the folks in Tampa Bay in that area. It wasn't such good news for those folks in Everglades City. I haven't actually seen any images come out of there yet. I'm not sure if anybody has even been able to get into it. So obviously there's some concern for those folks in that area, but it's not as many people as would have been affected if it had hugged this coast, which is the western coast, which is what we were fearing when I spoke to you yesterday. We were fearing that it was going to hug the coast all the way up to Tampa Bay, and that could have allowed it to strengthen as it travelled up those warm waters, and also drag a huge amount of storm surge with it. There was an interesting effect in Tampa Bay where we saw some of the water getting sucked out of the Bay Area. We've seen that before on one of the Caribbean islands a couple of days ago, and we knew that this was getting sucked into the storm system. Fortunately, it didn't cause anywhere near the amount of sort of storm surge we were expecting along this west coast. There is still some people do have those 9 feet storm surge at risk areas still in place, but it's nowhere near as bad as it could have been had it not jigged inland and dissipated some of its energy over the Everglades. So that's really helped the Tampa Bay folks dodge a bullet, which is really good news. And there's a lot of people coming and saying on the footage that I've seen today that the damage is nowhere near as bad as they were expecting. And again, that's really good news for those folks in those areas. But just because you haven't had it bad doesn't mean the storm didn't happen. It doesn't mean that somebody else up the road, round the corner, in the next town didn't sustain damage. So just be aware that you may have been lucky, somebody else may not have been so lucky. So do be kind. Don't discount people who say that they did sustain damage, that they did get flooded out, because these things do sometimes act in rather strange ways. For instance, we do know that there were some tornadoes that were spun off from the edge of the storm system. So it could be that somebody down the road got hit by one of those little tornadoes and your house somehow managed to miss it. So do be kind to neighbours and stuff, and don't accuse people of falsely exaggerating the claim. It will take probably many days before we know exactly the extent of the damage there in Florida. Obviously, people not being allowed back in to many areas today, and that is sensible. You really don't need to be on the roads today unless you absolutely have to be. Let the clean-up crews from the power companies and the city councils and so on do their work, clear those trees, get the power lines at least turned off, if not pulled up out the way. Don't be putting yourself at risk. Don't be adding to their problems. If you survive the storm this far, try and survive another 24 hours before you go outside if you need, unless you absolutely have to. Your job at the moment is to stay out of the way and let them do their job. It will speed up the process of getting the power back online. I know there's a lot of people without power, and if you are not on the road, if you are not adding to the problems that they're having to deal with, it will help them greatly. So if you can, hunker down until tomorrow at least, or until people in your local area tell you that it is now safe for you to go out and investigate what's happened in your areas. One thing I was pleased to see is that the I-75 did not disappear underwater. When they were talking about the 9 to 15 feet storm surges yesterday, it did look like much of the I-75 was going to be underwater, and that could have caused serious problems for the crews going in to help with the cleanup and to deliver aid into people in Florida. But it does look like the I-75 dodged that bullet, so that is also a very good news for the people of Florida. It should be much easier. I have heard talk that gas is going to be an issue, because obviously with the evacuations, a lot of petrol stations ran out of gas before the storm actually made landfall, and obviously tankers haven't been able to get in to deliver new supplies to those petrol stations while the storm was going. So again, if you have been evacuated out of Florida completely, if you can give it another day or two before you return home, then do, because that will enable the tankers to get in and deliver gas to some of those stations. I have seen a couple of damaged petrol stations. I'm not quite sure how widespread that issue is. Obviously, I know that mainstream media is a bit of a production show, so whether they had to drive out of their way to find a damaged gas station to show people to put panic into the air, I don't know. That would be speculation on my part. But just be prepared. If you can, fill up and take an extra can of gas with you, so that you don't have to stop along your way back into Florida when you do decide to return home. That would be a really good thing to do. I do know that Jacksonville was putting out a storm surge warning about probably about an hour or so ago, telling people to leave the coastal areas. And obviously you can see those winds driving in there into that northeast coast. Hopefully it is not going to be too bad for those folks, but that's about where the storm is now. It's at the top of the Florida panhandle, and it has dissipated to tropical storm status. It is no longer a hurricane as such. So that is Irma in terms of the actual storm itself and the damage in the aftermath. I do understand that unfortunately 5 people have lost their lives as a result of the storm there in Florida. I am expecting, unfortunately, that will rise because, excuse me, obviously they've only just begun the damage assessment process. They've only just begun getting back into areas to search for people. I hope it doesn't rise too far, but unfortunately we do know that 5 people, including a sheriff's deputy, have lost their lives during the storm. They are also putting out a warning not to get complacent in the aftermath. When you're cleaning up your property, don't enter flood waters. You don't know if there's a downed power line that might still be active. And also be extremely careful with chainsaws if you are chopping up trees and that kind of stuff, because there are an awful lot of trees to be cleared up after this storm, and that's where a lot of injuries occur. Post-storm is in electrocutions, people drowning in floodwaters that they shouldn't have entered, and also chainsaw injuries, so do be really careful. It would be a real shame to survive the storm and then have a silly accident a day or two afterwards. One problem you are going to have there in Florida now is that a lot of areas saw a huge amount of rainfall, talking about 10 inches in some places. That's nearly a foot. And obviously there was some storm surge, even though it wasn't as much as we were expecting. When that water starts to drain off over the next few days, do watch out for flash flooding if you are close to Florida waterways, lakes and storm drains, etc. Remember, some of the storm drains may well be blocked with debris, so they may not drain as well as they would do normally, and that could also cause localized flooding as these waters try to recede off of the land. So far it does look like things, although there has been widespread damage, the damage has been less intense than we were expecting. We were yesterday anticipating flood waters up to the level of the roofs on single story buildings, and that fortunately doesn't seem to have happened so much. So that is really good news for Florida, that this storm, although it was a big one and in terms of the size of it, it did dissipate a lot of its energy over the Everglades, which meant that a lot of people got off a lot more lightly than we were expecting. Next one on the horizon is of course Jose. If we look at this model, this is the GFS model with from earth.novschool.net, and you can see if I skip forward to the 12th tomorrow, you still see the remains of Irma virtually disappear now. And this is Jose here to the right of Florida, and it's going to kind of do a weird loop thing in the ocean. It looks like it's probably going to hit those islands to the southeast of Florida. A lot of them obviously sustained damage from Irma earlier on, so there's considerable concern for those islands. What it's going to do after that is a bit of a mystery at the moment. Some people are saying it's going to dissipate out there in the ocean and not actually make landfall with mainland USA. But if we look at the spaghetti models, just let me bring those up on the screen. The computer always seems to go slow when I'm recording. So the spaghetti models here, for those of you who are watching this on YouTube, will be able to see this. For those of you who aren't, I will put the link underneath the video, and you can check it out for yourself at your leisure, and go to myfoxhurricane.com/custom/storm3_models.html. This gives you various spaghetti models, and we can see that there is one which is the AEMN model, which does seem to indicate Jose going up and possibly making contact with the far northeast. Some of the other models look like the outskirts of Jose may raise the North Carolina coast, but they're not actually showing the eye hit of North Carolina itself at the moment. Now, this is far too early to say anything with certainty. We can see just how quickly things changed with Irma, and even up to the last minute, until it did that little last minute jig. Once it had actually made landfall at Naples and then did the last minute jig, the eye went over the Everglades, and that is where it dissipated much of its energy. So it's far too early to tell with Jose. I will be keeping an eye on it over the next few days for you, to try and give you an idea of what we think it's going to do. There was Tropical Storm Lee lurking just behind Jose. That seems to have come to nothing, thank goodness. So it looks like Lee we do not need to worry about. So a lot of people asking questions about it was a very strange storm. The fact that they kept saying it's going to go up the east coast of Florida, it's going to hit in Miami. So a lot of people actually evacuated into Tampa Bay, and then the last moment they said it's going to hit Tampa Bay. It has people asking all sorts of questions. Did they deliberately send people to the wrong place to evacuate and then have to evacuate them further north? It has people wondering exactly what was going on. Was this a wag the dog situation and they just wanted to see how people reacted? Did they want to, as I suggested before, just train the AI system to recognise what people were going to do, figure out who would obey an evacuation order and who would try and stay put and ride it out? Of course, when Irma actually hit, and there were curfews and things in place, and the police said they weren't going to be responding to incidents, there were the usual crowd of looters and criminals who just wanted to take advantage of the situation to pick themselves up a nice new pair of trainers. You folks are probably going to face a lengthy jail term, because they are going to come down hard on you guys, rightly so. This is a time for people to come together and help each other, not take advantage of each other. So that's one thing I really hope that these events prove Harvey was certainly showing the true spirit of America, that people do help each other out. In fact, there's true spirit of humanity, let's put it that way. Not that when something like this happens, people realise what's really important to them, and that's other people, it's their friends and their family. It's not all these little divisions about who you voted for, or which team you support, or any of this rubbish that the mainstream media likes to try and divide us and have us fighting each other over. It really doesn't matter when something like this hits, and that it unfortunately these situations tend to do one of two things. They not only show out the very best in humanity of people who will drop everything and come down to Texas and Florida and try and help people who need rebuilding work done and that kind of thing, but it does also show the very worst in people who will take advantage of somebody being appearing weak because of the situation. It's just the way things are when these things happen, but hopefully we can focus and try and use these events to bring people together and show them the real meaning of the word community, which seems to have got lost a bit in recent years. And those of you who've seen the video I put up yesterday will know that I did a map showing the disasters that are currently active in from FEMA, and I took the list from FEMA's own website. There is one that I have added to the list. Just bear with me while I bring up the latest picture. And that is Montana. FEMA are also active in Montana because of fires, so I've added them into the list. Now it's very interesting that it looks like all the states around Yellowstone have this fire response logo. Yellowstone is causing some concern for people. Obviously the earthquakes and things they've had in Idaho recently have actually been confirmed as being part of the Yellowstone system. It is said that this area there in Soda Springs that's had the recent earthquakes is actually part of the oldest part of the caldera, where was the initial eruption of this supervolcano, the first of the three that they know about. Obviously California is also an area of concern earthquake wise. Not only do you have the San Andreas fault there, but you also have the Mammoth Lakes region, and there's another big volcano up there in the mountains, which it has also been rumbling a lot recently around the Mammoth Lakes area. So I am watching those areas with caution, and I'm also anticipating something. As I said yesterday, I'm anticipating, if this is a deliberate strategized chain of events, which I believe it is, then I'm expecting something to kick off in the northeast. I'm expecting, if you draw a triangle between Illinois, Maine and North Carolina, anywhere in that triangle, I am expecting something to kick off soon. Whether it might be some kind of power outage type situation, or whether that is where Jose is going to hit. We did talk about Jose possibly scraping the North Carolina coast. I have huge concern for this area. It is a very densely populated area. This will be my guess that something will happen here soon. and possibly something in California. Again, I am looking at this as a chain of events that is going to set them up in a way that it looks like unrelated natural disasters or unrelated attacks or unrelated random events that will enable them to declare a nationwide state of emergency, which they will use as a prelude to declaring martial law across America. And again, people would say, well, you're obviously British, which I am. I live in Northumberland, UK. Why do I care what's going on over in America? Because as goes America, so goes the rest of the world. Now, people who talk about eschatology and biblical prophecy, and I'm one of them, we know that the season that we are in is the season which will see the rise of the final beast system. The heartland of the beast system is America, and that is where all the Federal Reserve System and the alphabet agencies are based. And so the other thing is that you guys have a lot of firearms amongst your population, legal and illegal firearms amongst your population. They are going to make a grab for the firearms sometime soon, I guarantee it. And the only way that they can do that without causing a full-on civil war will be to use this type of event, these natural disasters, to get people to willingly go to a FEMA camp, surrender their firearms, and they're never going to get those firearms back. So that is why I was highly suspicious of this when Harvey hit Texas, because Texas I'd always had marked down as being the most likely state to try and resist any plans to enforce martial law. They were also talking about having their own currency, gold-backed currency. I would have thought that Texas would secede from the Union of States before they would accept martial law, and troops on the streets of Texas. Of course, Hurricane Harvey comes in, devastates Houston, and obviously they are now welcoming FEMA and the alphabet agencies with open arms. So that is why I am seeing this as a planned series of events. So I'm going to be watching these areas very closely. I will keep this map updated. I may even add the dates to these little symbols when I put them on, so that we can see which states got added when. But you can see this kind of Gulf of Mexico, there's only Mississippi and Alabama that do not currently have a state of emergency. Is it possible that they'll trigger something here so they can lock down this whole coastline, and maybe even all the way up to Maine along the coastline? It's kind of what it is looking like it's heading for, but we will see. Something else I wanted to cover were a couple of stories that they let out, which kind of slipped under the rug, as it were, while everybody's attention was on them. And they do like doing this. If you notice there's ever anything really bad or anything they really don't want going around in social media circles, they always either release it on a Friday afternoon or while there is another big event happening. So let's take a look. And the first one is regarding 9/11. And of course today that it is with the anniversary of the events of 9/11 2001. So obviously we are remembering everybody who was affected by that event, and the families that are still suffering from having lost loved ones or having had severely injured loved ones as a result. But this particular story came out in the Independent yesterday, and it was saying that the Saudi Arabian government funded a dry run for the 9/11 attacks. Those who have been watching the 9/11 Truth movement know that around the election time they did talk about 9/11 and whether Trump was going to open up a new investigation. And when Trump actually came into power, he allowed the families for the first time ever to sue the Saudi Arabian government for its involvement in the events of that day. I haven't heard how any lawsuits are going, but it is interesting that they chose to release that story, which is not particularly surprising, to be perfectly honest, but it's interesting that they chose to let that story out while everybody's attention was on Florida. Another story that came out was in the LA Times, and this goes back to what I was saying about my concerns for California, because we have a situation where a lot of attention is being given to Yellowstone. Not much attention is being given to that system that I mentioned where up by the Mammoth Lakes, which is a supervolcano system, which I can't quite remember the name of, so I'm just going to have to try and get onto Google and check. Just bear with me one moment. So it is part of a supervolcano system. Yellowstone is not your only supervolcano over there. Okay, so it is Mammoth Mountain is the volcano there, and we do know that there is movement in the on that mountain, which could indicate a pending eruption, much in the same way that there is also movement in Yellowstone that could indicate the same thing. It's just a question of when, and it could be tomorrow, it could be in thousands of years' time. But it's interesting that as everybody was focusing on Florida, the LA Times decided to put out an article which says that California could be hit by an 8.2 earthquake. And obviously they're talking here about the San Andreas Fault, which does run under Los Angeles and some densely populated areas. It would be a catastrophic earthquake if it would happen, or when it happens. It's more of a question of when than if. But it's interesting that they put that out yesterday when everybody's attention was on Irma. Is this so that they can, when it happens, they can say, well, we told you, we put it out there, we said that you needed to get prepared for it, don't blame us. And then again today, same paper, LA Times, and again they're talking about the possibility of San Andreas magnitude 7 or greater earthquake. But in this instance, they're hoping to develop an app which will help you know when the next big one may be coming. So it's almost as if they put out, get prepared, San Andreas Fault may pop with a big earthquake. Maybe somebody said, you should have said that, that's kind of going to scare people. It's going to scare people. Bear with me a second. I've just got some sound going on here. I hope you can't hear it, but it's very distracting. And they are... Just going to close those windows. Maybe somebody said that you shouldn't have put out that San Andreas is expecting a 8.2, you need to tone it down a bit. So the following day they put out an article saying we're going to develop an app that's going to tell you or help you know when that big earthquake is coming, almost like they're putting it back on the back burner for people. So is that what happened? Did they get ticked off for spreading fear, or actually telling people the truth that something is on the horizon for California? Who knows? We do need to try and figure out what is in the works. We do know, if you've read Agenda 21 and Agenda 2030 from the United Nations in their own paperwork, then you know what the end goal is, you know what the end plan is, and we just need to try and stay one step ahead of them, so that we know that we are being gamed, that we know that there are things we can do to work around the system to prepare ourselves for what they have planned for us. I always also come back to the Georgia Guidestones. Everybody always thought, when these things went up, that the event that was going to cause a drop in the population number was going to be conflict with Russia back in the 60s after the Second World War. And they always said, well, you don't need to worry too much about the Georgia Guidestones. Yes, they do on the first of these, what they call the new 10 Commandments. The first of those is to maintain the population under 500 million people. That's globally, in perpetual balance with nature. So everybody thought, well, this was obviously, it was going to. They were planning for the aftermath of the a nuclear war, because it was erected in 1980. That was at the very high tension moments of the Cold War. So everybody thought, well, this is just when you're rebuilding civilization after the Cold War. These are the rules that the survivors were to follow. That's what everybody always said. But are we now seeing that the depopulation agenda accelerate? Are we seeing this come to fruition as they get ready to bring in their final one world government with their single currency and the single religion? Everything that the scriptures warn us is on the horizon. And anybody who thinks that we aren't living in the times that the prophets wrote of, just go and read Matthew 24 and tell me that we are not living in the times that were spoken of by Yeshua in that passage. Anyway, the Guidestones, everybody always said, don't worry about the 500 million thing. We're now seeing, I believe, the beginning. Well, not necessarily the beginning. They've been working on this for quite some time, with the GMOs, with the eugenics agenda, with the chemicals they subject us to, with the geoengineering, trying to get the population numbers down. You have people like Bill Gates coming out saying that there are far too many of us. Prince Philip, I believe, once said that he would come back as a virus to wipe out humanity because there's too many of us. So these are anti-human Luciferians that we are dealing with. and we need to band together as humans to help each other survive through whatever they've got planned for us in our area. We need to show them that we will not be divided under false narratives of race, colour or creed, that we will help each other and do as Yeshua said, to love thy neighbour as thyself. Yeshua also said that when we feed the hungry, give shelter to the homeless, all that kind of thing, that we were also doing it for him. And as Christians, I believe that the next few years, if any of us live that long, but starting this autumn, if not already, we're going to have plenty of opportunities to do exactly what Yeshua instructed us to do in that passage. We're going to have plenty of opportunities to help feed the homeless, to help feed the hungry, to shelter the homeless, and to take care of the children. But we can only do that if we have prepared, if we are in the same, I hate to use the word, but the zombie state of most other people who have no idea that anything is wrong with the world, think that Walmart is always going to be around the corner forever, or for Tesco's here in the UK, that they're always going to be able to pop it in on the way home from work for a slice of bread, and that they're always going to be able to switch on a light switch, heat something up in the microwave, have no clue how or what they're going to do if there's a sustained power outage, or if they can't get to the shops to buy food for a week. If we are in that situation ourselves, then we are not going to be able to help. And I know many people say, well, we don't need to, if we're entering the tribulation, we don't need to worry about it, because we are going to be raptured out of here before the tribulation starts. Well, I kind of hope you guys are right, because the tribulation is going to be a terrible time to be a Christian in this world. But I do not see myself, I do not see, after the research I've done, enough evidence of a pre-tribulation rapture in Scripture. I believe I'm more of a post-tribulation person. But even if you are a pre-tribber, and even if you are right on the pre-tribber thing, if you have in your house a supply of food, a supply of a way to boil water if the power goes out, that kind of thing, if you do get raptured out before anything happens in your area, then that is supplies that somebody else can use, a family member or a friend or a neighbour. They're supplies that they can use to help them survive. And if you are not raptured out, if us post-tribulation people are right, then well, you'll be able to make use of it yourselves, and you'll be able to do what Yeshua taught us to do, and help our neighbours and our families and those around us in these times ahead, because things are going to get far worse before they get any better. These are, I believe it's too soon for the wrath. I believe that what we are seeing is the build up to the introduction of that final beast kingdom, and what Yeshua called the birthing pains. That is a time that I believe we are in. So things are going to get a whole lot worse. This is before Yeshua actually returns. I know a lot of people even think that September the 23rd we'll see him return. If you actually read Revelation 12, you'll see that there's a second sign in the sky, which is the red dragon, the dragon of old, returning. And that is a time that I believe John was trying to warn us of when he wrote that passage, that we are seeing the rise of the beast. It is too soon for the return of the Messiah. Messiah will return, but I think it's too soon to expect him just yet. I do believe that there will be a false Messiah. I believe this is the ancient alien agenda. I believe that we'll be told that our alien ancestors have returned to help us through these times, to stop us from destroying each other, and it will be a lie. But I will go into that in another video because that's a whole different topic. Anyway, as we are entering dangerous times, I just wanted to close out this video with the Aaronic blessing. This was a blessing given to Moses, and he was told to have Aaron and his sons, the Levites, bless the children of Israel this way. And whether you are Jewish, or whether you are a believer in Yeshua or Jesus Christ, the Son of Man, the Messiah, if you are a Christian, then you are grafted in to Israel. So this is for you as well, wherever you live, whatever the colour of your skin, we all bleed the same red blood. And when I refer to the Father, I call him Yahuwah. I know some of you call him Yahweh or Jehovah. I'm not going to get pedantic about it. There are far more important topics to talk about. The same with Yeshua. If you call him Jesus, I'm fine with that. I'm not going to have a go at you. I just use Yeshua because I do not like mainstream Christianity. If you actually read the Bible, it is very much about having a relationship with Yeshua directly, without a religious institution, and that is the path that I try and follow. So you will hear me use Yahuwah throughout this passage. So this is taken from Numbers chapter 6, and it is verses 24 to 26. It's well worth either writing this out and putting it up on your wall somewhere, or printing it out. Just go to biblegateway.com or somewhere like that, or Google the Aaronic blessing, and you'll be able to find the words to put up on your wall and be able to bless your family and friends with this blessing. Yahuwah bless thee and keep thee. Yahuwah make his face to shine upon thee and be gracious to thee. Yahuwah lift up his countenance upon thee and give thee peace. May Yahuwah and his son Yeshua be with you always, and I will talk to you again soon.